In the quiet classroom of the 1950s, history comes alive.
This is where it all began, the first great migration of humankind. These weren't just wanderers, they were pioneers, shaping the destiny of generations to come.
The land we now call America.
They are hearing the story of all humanity's first footsteps. Picture this, a skeleton buried in Montana for over 12,000 years. When scientists finally tested its DNA, the results turned the history books upside down. We all grew up with the same story, that Native Americans came from Asia, crossing a frozen land bridge into North America. But recent DNA evidence has cracked that story wide open. Because Native Americans carry the strangest DNA in the world. Ghost lineages, lost ancestors, and echoes from places no one expected. In 2014, a team of geneticists studied what's now known as the Anzac child, the oldest genome ever recovered from the Americas. Their results showed a direct genetic link between this ancient boy and today's Native American tribes. But here's the twist. The DNA also carried markers found in unexpected populations across Siberia and even hints of connections stretching toward Europe. This was shocking because for generations we thought the story was much simpler. For most of the last century, scientists believed that Native Americans came from just one place, through one route, a land bridge called Beringia. It wasn't just a strip of land, it was a frozen grassland, hundreds of miles wide, stretching from Siberia to Alaska. The theory went like this. Small groups of hunters from Asia followed herds of mammoth and bison across that bridge. Step by step, generation by generation, they spread into the Americas. Archaeologists thought they had proof. In the 1930s, sharp stone spear points were discovered near Clovis, New Mexico. They dated back about 13,000 years, making them the earliest tools ever found in the Americas. For decades, the idea stuck. These were the first Americans. It was a clean, simple story. Asia to Alaska, land bridge to continent, one migration. And for nearly 100 years, that's the version written in the textbooks. But then the cracks began to show. In the summer of 1996, two college students were watching a hydroplane race along the Columbia River in Washington state. The waterline had dropped unusually low, leaving muddy banks exposed. As they walked along the edge, something caught their eyes. What looked like a human skull, half buried in the clay. At first, it seemed like the beginning of a crime story. The sheriff arrived, imagining it might be the remains of a missing person. But when archaeologists examined the bones and ran radiocarbon tests, the truth was staggering. This man wasn't a murder victim. He had died nearly 9,000 years ago. He would become known as Kennewick Man, one of the most important and most controversial skeletons ever found in North America. But there was a problem. Kennewick Man didn't look like what scientists expected. His skull shape, long, narrow, with features that seemed out of place, didn't match modern Native American populations. Some anthropologists argued he looked more like the ancient Ainu people of Japan. Others saw similarities to Polynesia, even suggesting a mysterious migration across the Pacific. It was an explosive claim.
If true, it would mean the first Americans weren't only from Asia via Beringia, but perhaps from other places too. That suggestion sparked a firestorm, not just in science, but in culture and law. Native tribes of the Columbia Plateau, the Umatilla, Yakima, Nez Perce, and Colville declared immediately, "This is our ancestor." To them, there was no doubt. Kennewick man was family, a grandfather from deep time. According to the Native American Graves Protection and Repatriation Act, or NAGPRA, he should be returned for a respectful reburial. Scientists pushed back. To them, Kennewick man was a priceless window into prehistory, a once-in-a-lifetime chance to study one of the earliest people of the continent. They feared that if he was buried, centuries of questions about America's first settlers would remain unanswered. The fight escalated into one of the most bitter disputes in archaeology. Court cases dragged on, tribal elders spoke of spiritual violation, scientists published papers insisting the skull's measurements proved non-native origins. News headlines called him the most important skeleton in America and also the most contested. This was no longer just about bones. It was about ownership of history. Who gets to tell the story of America's beginnings, science, or the descendants of the people who lived it? For almost 2 decades, Kennewick man was trapped in limbo. Scientists argued over cranial measurements, pointing to resemblances with populations thousands of miles away. Tribes kept demanding his return, calling the studies a violation of his spirit. From 1996 until 2015, no one had a clear answer. His face seemed to contradict his supposed ancestry. His body seemed to hold secrets that couldn't be unlocked. And then, finally, technology caught up. DNA testing, impossible in the 1990s, had advanced enough to solve the mystery. In 2015, a team of geneticists at the University of Copenhagen sequenced Kennewick man's genome. The results overturned 2 decades of speculation. Despite his unusual skull shape, the DNA told a clear story. Kennewick man was most closely related to modern Native American tribes.
Among those tribes, the Colville, who had claimed him from the very beginning, turned out to be among his closest living relatives. In 2017, after 20 years of legal battles and bitter arguments, Kennewick man was finally laid to rest in a private tribal ceremony. He was given back to his descendants. But his legacy is more than a burial. Kennewick man forced science to confront its limits, to recognize that bones and skulls don't always tell the full truth, and that DNA can reveal connections hidden for thousands of years. He also exposed the deeper struggle between tradition and research, between respecting ancestors and seeking knowledge. And most of all, he cracked open the simple story we thought we knew. His face said one thing, his genes said another. He was a reminder that America's first peoples weren't a single wave, or a single look, or a single story. Kennewick man proved the past is far more complex and far more human than we imagined. And just when scientists thought they were beginning to piece that puzzle together, another discovery would shatter the picture even further. Not in America, but halfway across the world. Picture a frozen steppe in Siberia, 24,000 years ago. The winds whip across a vast icy plain near Lake Baikal. A small band of hunter-gatherers lays a young boy to rest. His body is wrapped in fur, surrounded by ivory ornaments carved with care. In this world of mammoths and reindeer, even death was honored with ritual. He is buried deep, as if his people knew he carried something precious. That child would remain in the ground for nearly 24 millennia, until Russian archaeologists uncovered his tiny bones near a village called Malta. At first, the site was just another Paleolithic burial, one of many scattered across Siberia. But when geneticists examined his remains in 2013, they made a discovery that stunned the world. The boy's DNA, the oldest complete genome ever recovered from Siberia, revealed something no one expected. He was not purely Asian, as scientists assumed the first Americans' ancestors must have been. Instead, half of his ancestry was West Eurasian, closer to Europeans and people from the Middle East. The other half was East Asian. This mix of European and Asian ancestry was a shock. It suggested that the population this boy belonged to, a group now called the ancient North Eurasians, once spread across Siberia, long before history began. And though this group eventually disappeared, its genetic fingerprints survived. Where? In Native Americans. When scientists compared Malta Boy's genome to indigenous peoples across the Americas, the connection was undeniable. Up to 40% of Native American ancestry comes from this lost Siberian population. In other words, Native Americans are not simply descendant from East Asians who crossed the Bering land bridge. They also carry the legacy of a vanished people, a people with deep ties to both Europe and Asia. Think about what that means. The ancestors of today's Native Americans were not a single isolated group moving in one direction. They were the product of ancient mixtures, of peoples meeting and blending in the harsh heart of Ice Age Siberia. And when some of their descendants eventually crossed into the Americas, they carried those hidden lineages with them.
In a straight line. Asia, Beringia, America. But Malta Boy showed that truth was more like a web, with strands stretching back into regions no one expected. And yet, this wasn't just science. It was human. That little boy, buried with ivory beads, carried within his cells the story of an entire lost people. A people whose culture vanished, whose name we'll never know, but whose blood still flows today in millions of Native Americans. The multi-discovery left scientists with haunting questions. Who exactly were these ancient North Eurasians? How far did they roam across the Ice Age world? And why did they vanish, leaving only genetic echoes behind? What's certain is this. Without Malta Boy, we might never have realized that Native American origins reach not only east to Asia, but west, across Siberia, toward Europe. His genome rewrote the map of human migration and reminded us that our beginnings are rarely simple.
For almost a century, we told ourselves a simple story. One land bridge, one migration, one people. But the truth, revealed piece by piece, is far more layered. Today, most scientists agree the Americas were not settled in a single wave. Instead, there were multiple migrations across thousands of years, each adding new threads to the human tapestry. Archaeology gives us some of the strongest clues. In Chile, nearly 8,000 miles south of Alaska, lies Monte Verde, a site that dates back more than 14,500 years. That's 1,000 years older than the Clovis culture once thought to be the first Americans. Monte Verde's people lived in wooden huts, cooked with hearth fires, and gathered plants from a lush riverside environment. Their very existence shows humans reached South America long before the Clovis first story even began. Far to the north, early sites in Alaska and Western Canada suggest that humans may have hugged the Pacific coastline, moving quickly southward while the interior of the continent was still locked in ice. Instead of trudging across an open grassland, these early migrants could have traveled by boat or by foot along rich kelp-filled shorelines. Archaeologists now call this the kelp highway theory. Genetics, too, supports the idea of multiple waves. The DNA of Native American groups doesn't trace back to a single ancestral source, but to several populations from different times and regions. Some from East Asia, others linked to Siberia, and even faint signals from Australo-Melanesia. Imagine an animated timeline sweeping across thousands of years. The first arrows stretch from Siberia into Alaska around 16,000 years ago. Soon after, another wave pushes down the Pacific coast, reaching Chile in a matter of centuries. Later still, additional migrations arrive, layering new genetic and cultural influences on top of the old. The picture that emerges is no longer neat and tidy. Instead, it is dynamic, complex, and deeply human. The peopling of the Americas wasn't a single event. It was a long journey with many paths, many travelers, and many stories. But not all stories agree. For decades, archaeologists and geneticists have pieced together migration models, maps, and timelines. But there's another perspective, one that doesn't come from laboratories or excavation sites, but from memory carried in story. Many native peoples across the Americas have oral traditions that say something very different. We have always been here. These aren't treated as metaphor, but as lived truth, passed down for countless generations. That creates a clash. On one side, science says waves of migration from Asia thousands of years ago, mixing and moving across the continents. On the other side, indigenous voices affirmed that their origins are rooted in the land itself, not in faraway Siberia or across a frozen bridge. Anthropologists and native elders often describe this tension as two ways of knowing. Science relies on genetics, bones, and dates. Oral tradition is built on memory, spirit, and cultural continuity. Both seek to answer the same question: where do we come from, but through different lenses. Today, there's a growing movement among scholars to treat these narratives with respect, not as contradictions to be corrected, but as parallel truths that reveal how humans make sense of their beginnings. Some researchers even say oral histories can hold real clues: floods, migrations, ancient encounters remembered in story form long before writing existed. The clash of stories is really a reminder. History isn't just about data points. It's also about identity, meaning, and belonging. For Native communities, saying "we've always been here" isn't just about the past. It's about their bond with the land, their ancestors, and their survival today.
So where does all of this leave us? Piece by piece, a new model has emerged, one that blends DNA, archaeology, and oral traditions into a picture far richer than we once imagined. Genetics shows us that Native Americans carry the legacy of multiple ancient lineages, from Siberia, from long-lost populations like Malta boys, and perhaps even from distant Pacific peoples. Archaeology gives us early settlements, from Alaska to Monteverde in Chile, proving that humans adapted to ice, coastlines, forests, and deserts far earlier than we thought possible. And oral traditions remind us that these aren't just migrations on a map. They are lives lived, worlds built, and identities carried forward. The peopling of the Americas wasn't a single event, but a vast tapestry woven across tens of thousands of years. Out of that mixture came resilience, survival, and cultural continuity. The descendants of those first travelers are still here today, speaking their languages, practicing their traditions, and telling their stories, reminders that the past is not gone, but alive in the present. And yet, even now, mysteries remain. In the DNA of native peoples, scientists keep finding faint traces of lost populations, genetic signals that don't match any known group alive today. Who were they? Where did they come from? Did they vanish? Or did their bloodline blend so completely that only whispers remain? Every discovery, from Kennewick man to Malta boy, from Lucia to the Amazonian connection, has shown us one thing: the story is never finished. With every cave explored, every bone unearthed, every genome sequenced, the map of human history shifts beneath our feet. The first Americans may not have been who we thought, but their story, our story, is still being written, and perhaps the greatest chapters are yet to come.